In this video, I'm going to introduce you to my absolute favorite part of Fullcast Copy.ai, which are workflows. And workflows are different in the chats and even Content Agent Studio in that they're less about creating things for a single task or a repeated task and more about codifying an entire process, which is where the real time savings and connective tissue between your go-to-market functions exist. And by that, I mean using the same inputs, we can now create assets for marketing, for sales, for customer success, for any function on the team in a way that is always on brand, that is consistent with messaging across the board, and can be run at scale. Also, you don't need to be a technical coder or even technically minded in order to create really great workflows. All you need to do is have a bit of time to test back and forth and understand how this works. So on the left-hand side dashboard, you can click Workflows. You'll see we have folders, just like we always do in the with Chat and Content Agent Studio, but we can click Create New, either Folder or Workflow. And here we have the Workflow Builder. Instead of adding a trigger or the input, instead what I like to do is start with a very basic prompt telling the workflow what I will give it as an input, and then telling it what I expect as an output. So for today, we will give it a very simple instruction. Given the transcript of a podcast, I want you to create a LinkedIn post, a tweet, and a YouTube description. Then we click Generate. And in a few minutes, it will build the outline of what we just wrote. Now, a pro tip for building a workflow is to really expect a bit of back and forth as you build. That's because it is not a magic box or mind reader. We have to train it with what we want. But after it's been trained, we can create any of the assets, or all of the assets that we're requiring at any scale that we want. And again, I'll walk you through how we do all of that. Okay, so now we have in the build view here, and you'll see 5 tabs. Whenever we're building a workflow, we want to be in the build view. We have the input, generate LinkedIn post, generate tweet, generate YouTube description, and then it assumed that we wanted all of this compiled into a single source. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. For this example, let's say that we don't want this final step. We could simply click the little trash can icon and delete it. Now, if we want to edit any of this, or if we want to test it, we can click Test Workflow. Now we can add a transcript and run workflow. But first, we're going to do a little bit of editing. And to edit each individual step, or as we call them, actions, all you have to do is click on the block. So in this case, we'll click on the input block, podcast transcript. That looks right. If we wanted to, we could add input. Let's say that we had more details about the podcast we're doing. And let's say we had some show notes. We would click New Input, and then we'd change that name to Show Notes, give it a description. And remember, the more input that you can add, the better the outputs will be. And now we can go block by block and make sure that we're getting the highest quality results within this workflow. So now we have the inputs that will be a podcast transcript and show notes, and we can click on the next action. And you'll see here that in this action, as part of the prompt, it's given some prompting out of the box, but we can modify any of this as we'd like. And since we added a brand new input, maybe we want to put show notes here. To pull in any of the information, we just have to click a hashtag, and we'll have the workflow inputs. So we would add show notes. But you'll notice if we click that hashtag, we also have all of our info-based entries. So if you have examples of what a great LinkedIn post looks like, then you can simply go through and pull those examples from your info-base if you've loaded them. If you haven't seen that video on how to load something into info-base, I highly suggest you check that out. But for now, let's say that we want to just generate this LinkedIn post. Another pro tip would be something like, here is an example from the past. And again, you can pull it in the info base, or you can paste it directly in there. And I always like to add this line, deliver the outputs only as expected, nothing more. The reason is, in the advanced setting, we can change the model. Now, you saw in the chat feature that we are model agnostic. It is the same with workflows, meaning depending on what task it is doing, we are able to change the LLM that is doing that task. So as you'll see in a moment, some tasks are research-based, some will scrape web pages, and we really want to make sure that we're tasking the right task with the right LLM. So in this case, it's going to write a LinkedIn post. Claude is really good at more human-based writing. Let's say we want to change the creativity level. We can do that. 7 is typically recommended, but if you want it to follow your prompt exactly, you can make it less creative, more creative, and you can play with those settings. You can add lengths, but for the most part, people are happy to simply change the LLM. And I've been using Google Gemini 2.5 a lot, but again, it's more for research or other tasks. This one, I would use 4.5 Sonnet. And in the background information, you're really giving this an identity. One way to think about this is looking at each individual action or block as its own custom GPT. And by that, I mean you give it a prompt, but then you also tell it what it's really good at. And so in this case, what it is a professional social media content creator. And let's say that I want to say you're writing for Fullcast. And maybe I have some information about Fullcast already in here, our core messaging. And now that is going to be baked into this step's identity. We can also change the structure if we'd like, or if we add an example, we can remove that structure and give it a little bit more freedom in the writing to follow. However, we're getting the best outputs after we tested this a little bit. Then we click Save Action. So now let's say we're happy with the prompt for our LinkedIn post and we want to go down to our tweet. One thing that I really like is, again, we'll add the input because we added that after the workflow was built to add show notes. I sometimes, though, like to say, here is the LinkedIn post you wrote. And now you'll notice, not just the workflow inputs or info base, I can pull in any of the previous created content within the workflow now into the next step. And this is an idea called prompt chaining, where we are starting to prompt these steps together and pass the outputs to the next step. And in that way, we can make sure that it is always on brand and that branding is consistent. So I click Save Action. Now, let's say I wanted to add a brand new step. So I close out of here, I'm in my build view, and I think, oh shoot, you know what? I wanted to add some custom research before any of this gets generated to find some hooks. I could click this plus icon and go through this library of actions that has text generation, research, utilities, platinum actions for those who are on the enterprise plan. And these are like multivariate workflows all wrapped up into one that does some pretty cool things. Pulling content from Infobase, integrating with various CRMs or different tools like Slack, Google Docs, Salesforce. Tables, which we've already taken a look at, and how we can connect tables to our research, and so on. And in this case, let's say I wanted to do some research. I might go here and say, okay, we want a research agent. And what would you like it to research? And then you would put a research query here. Statistics in go-to-market. Click Save Action. Now, if I wanted to add some of that research, I would then do exactly what I did with the show notes. I would type research agent, findings, and pull in all of the information that research agent is going to come up with. From there, I can add the podcast transcript and the show notes. I can then go through and test each one individually to make sure that I'm getting the right outputs. And then I can go through here and either run it individually or I can run it in bulk as a table once published. And in the next video, I'm going to show you an actual run workflow. We will test it and then you'll see how we can make the modifications as needed. But this video is just to get a sense of how you can start building a workflow in plain English with no coding, how you can then modify each step and action prompt by pulling in relevant information from previous runs, from your inputs, or from your info base, and some of the options that we have in these action libraries. Again, we'll also have a different video on this to go into more detail on each one and how you can construct the best workflows for you and your team.